Welcome everybody on a very hot Friday in Bangkok. And welcome to our session on confronting authoritarianism and techno-colonialism in Southeast Asia. 3 months after the cuts, understanding the US DOGE and USAID's impact now. So what has techno-colonialism and the growing authoritarianism and the USAID cuts, how are they connected and how are we affected? Well, this is the right place to find out all about it. And I am very fortunate to be flanked by two kick-ass feminists from the region, all leaders in their field. And I believe we have Michael Buck joining us online from Europe, sending us love. Is that your real love or is that AI generated love? That's what we want to know. Anyway, I'm going to introduce, I'm Debbie Stothard. I'm going to be your moderator, and I'm from ASEAN Burma, the Alternative ASEAN Network on Burma. Although this session is not specifically on Burma, we are proud or founding members of the ASEAN digital ASEAN coalition to hashtag stop digital dictatorship. So on, yep, Emily's just double checking the Facebook Live is working. On my right, I have Emily Palamit Pradicit, founder and executive director of Manusia Foundation. She's a decolonial and intersectional feminist. And if that's not a double threat, the triple threat is that she's an international human rights lawyer. She leads regional efforts to expose transnational repression and defend digital rights through the ASEAN coalition to hashtag stop digital dictatorship. We are members. We are members. You're a member. You better be a member. So look, everyone here, if you're interested in this topic, join the coalition. She will be speaking on shrinking civic space, AI policing in Thailand. In case you know, did you notice the extra tall Thai policeman in an extra slim Thai policeman? Well, actually, they're not men, they're AI robots. So she's going to talk about AI policing in Thailand and decolonizing digital governance. And then the lovely Michael Buck, who is joining us online, is advisor at the Center for AI. And sorry, I better make sure. It's Artificial Intelligence Leadership in Singapore and co-founder of Sprint Public Interests in Thailand. He's a digital rights and aid development expert with decades. Okay, it doesn't, you still look too young to be saying decades. Working on aid and development from the time he was in kindergarten and working on tech and human rights. He will unpack techno-colonialism, new term to many of us, robotic border surveillance in the US and Greece, probably soon to come to our region, and the risks of donor-driven AI deployment in authoritarian settings. On my left, oh, very dangerous woman, charming, gorgeous, and so smart. Yasmin Ullah, Executive Director of the Rohingya Maya Final Collaborative Network, a powerful Rohingya woman human rights defender. She will highlight the consequences of USAID cuts in refugee camps, mass digital hate against Rohingya, and resistance through community empowerment. So, we are going to talk about the problem and we are going to talk about the solutions. What options do we have and how do we empower ourselves to resist? So at the moment, we are in the middle of a perfect storm. Trump and DOGE, the Department of Government Efficiency, which has been using a lot of artificial intelligence to make decisions on aid that will essentially destabilize many parts of the world, and that will change life as we know it. So it was not just about people working in diversity, equality and inclusion. It was basically anyone working on women's rights, anyone pushing back on digital dictatorship, anyone actually, ironically, working for freedom of expression. A lot of organizations collapsed around us. A lot of people lost their jobs. And it was horrific in the sense that these decisions, these arbitrary decisions, basically put us in a position of violating our own labor laws, because many people lost their jobs overnight, and in some without any notice whatsoever. So many organizations around the world were forced to even violate their own rental agreements. They couldn't fulfill contracts, and it was a very arbitrary and shocking way to cut aid. And that has literally cost lives as well. It's caused deaths of people on the border, refugees on the border who lost it, literally could not breathe. They could not get oxygen because the medical services that they needed were actually being funded by USAID, and the INGOs had to stop operations immediately. So literally taking away oxygen from people. But on the other side is actually the fact that we have been facing shrinking civic space in this region. We have been facing increasing threats, digital threats, where transnational repression is being inflicted, where nowhere is safe for activists, even if they were to flee to a neighboring country. And the creeping authoritarianism has turned into galloping authoritarianism in this region, where artificial intelligence is being used and abused by authoritarians for authoritarianism. So this is, and in the middle of this all is this understanding that we are also facing techno-colonialism. And that, I think, is also going to be quite an interesting exposition today. What is techno-colonialism? And what does that mean for people living and growing up in a world governed by artificial intelligence, or shall we say controlled by artificial intelligence, with very little governance based on human rights? So I'm going to start the first round with looking at the threats. So what does this mean? What in our daily lives, in what we're doing day to day and in the years ahead, what does this threat look like? And I'm going to start with Emily, and then Michael, and then Yasmin. So we're going to have 3 rounds on this panel, and I'll start with you. Emily, please go for it.
Thanks very much. Thank you very much, Debbie. I don't know if the mic is on.
No.
No? It's fine. So my name is Emily Palani-Praditier. I'm the founder and executive director of the Manoucheya Foundation. We are in a decolonial intersectional feminist organization, and we were receiving USAID funding. So obviously, since we represent everything that the current Trump government hates, we were primarily among the first people to be impacted and have our projects terminated. And so the trends that I'm going to share with you are trends that we have been witnessing already since last year, in the past few years, with the ASEAN Regional Coalition to Stop Digital Dictatorship, but also with the work that we do on protection of human rights defenders. And so it was really important for me and for all of us and for the organizations that we're working with that we receive the necessary funds to be able to protect human rights defenders, to be able to tackle the threats that were growing and coming. But with the USAID funding cuts and bilateral donors all retreating, not just the US, but also, other countries, it's just weakening our position. It's basically making us weaker. So the first point I would like to talk about is transnational repression. We've been talking about it for the past few years, but more since 2024 because of the increased transnational repression happening on Thai soil, with Cambodian activists, Vietnamese activists being arrested, being taken to the IDC, some of them, disappearing, but also some of them being killed. And so what we have witnessed is really human rights defenders increasingly being targeted both online and offline. And it's getting worse because, as you might all know, the current Thai government has tightened its ties with the Cambodian regime. So the Thaksin and the Hun regimes are working closely. And it's sending us a very strong signal that it's deepening impunity. So before, we would witness transnational repression and we would have the Thai government trying to defend itself or saying, it's not happening. We are not aware of what our security guys are discussing with the neighboring countries. But now we have openly, the Thai Prime Minister going to Phnom Penh on 23rd April and meeting with Hun Manet, and Hun Manet basically congratulating her and thanking her, for cracking down on dissenting voices, on dissenting activists on Thai soil. So it's really worrying for us because we see that we move from arrest and disappearance to blatant killings. And as an illustration, I'm sure that you are all aware of the case of Lemkia, who is a prominent, former political leader in Cambodia, who has both Cambodian and French nationality, and who was killed after crossing the Cambodian border and came into Bangkok. He was killed in Bangkok on 7 June, in the eyes of everybody, and it was followed, with impunity. Although we had a scenario of Thai police following him and showing the French government that they are doing something about it. But for us, we know that the Thai regime and the Cambodian regime are tightening their relationship, and so transnational repression, specifically against Cambodian activists, is just going to increase. For us, it's a huge concern because, as I said, we have been impacted by USAID cuts, which means that the retreat of the AIDS fund has undercut Manushya rapid response and protection work. We had a team of 5 to 6 people who were doing just that, protecting human rights defenders, putting them into safe house, doing all the necessary support for them to be hidden and protected, because Thailand did not ratify the Geneva Convention, so Thailand is not supposed to protect refugees. So when they come here, they think it's a safe haven, but they're facing transnational repression because the Thai government does not offer any protection. So the work falls on us. The work falls on activists. The work falls on civil society, and it's now has worsened the situation for also our organization because we receive more and more demands since the USAID cuts. We were not able to keep our safe houses, so when they said we had to cancel rents, we also had to cancel rents of our safe houses. We had to ask refugees to leave our safe houses. We had to help them find new shelters. Obviously, it's not ideal, and it's really difficult for us in terms of our burnout and our mental health and breakdowns among our team and our partners. And I think it has also showed us that with the USAID cuts, not only Manushya, but most of the groups providing rapid response and protection have been cut because it was the funding coming mainly from the US. And for us, it's just not normal that it was, especially in Bangkok and in Thailand, it was a feminist organization, mainly women, that was doing this work. We have seen a lot of our colleagues, male colleagues, talking on panels, talking about transnational repression, but the people who were actually doing the work and protecting refugees were us. And so it has even more deepened our negative impact on our mental health, and the fact that refugees still come to us, although we don't have more support for them, and it's really the strategy to weaken us. So the USAID cuts were not neutral. For us, they were very strategic. They came in a time when our protection work was already under attack because more and more growing attacks and transnational repression on Thai soil, and they strategically weaken our frontline defenders. And so for us, they were strategically designed to weaken us on the ground and to drain, Global South solidarity and Global South-led resistance of resources that we need to survive. While we are being defunded by the US, we are also simultaneously being attacked by Thai royalists and conservatives who accuse Manu Shaya of serving US interests. So while we have the US cuts, it was important for me to speak with the media to explain, the negative impact of the USAID cuts on the ground. So I have spoken with a lot of media, global and regional and local, and it has driven attacks against us. So now we have the conservative and royalists accusing us from serving US interests. And so we feel that, we are, it's deliberate contradiction, right? Because we are being punished for receiving aid. So we are being punished by Trump and Musk for receiving USAID aid and for doing the work that we do of feminist, decolonial, intersectional, supporting indigenous people, supporting democracy activists and youth. And we're also being punished now by the Thai royalists and conservative for losing the funding because we're supposed to defend US interests. But you see, we are pro-Palestine, so we were definitely not supporting and defending US interests. So the smear campaign is really designed to delegitimize our work and to isolate us from the rest of the world, from solidarity networks, from the global South friends, because the goal from the Thai conservatives now is to name us and to brand us as the enemy of the states. So instead of receiving sympathy, from Thai people, instead of receiving sympathy from Thai people who could support us and support refugees, the goal is to create more hate against groups like us, which is really, really problematic for us. And beyond all of that, it's really important for us to share with you that we are being weakened by the US funding cuts, for sure. And we're also being vilified by the Thai regime. It's not a contradiction at all, it's a strategy. And it's how authoritarian systems work, and that's how they break resistance from both ends. And so that's really the goal. Before we were witnessing legal harassment, against activists, slap cases, and now we are witnessing basically the Western world, authoritarians, and our local authoritarian regimes trying to destroy us. So we are really being, shrink from both ends, and the goal is really to break our resistance. The last point I would like to share, it's beyond transnational repression. It's now the work that is happening online, and the activism that is happening online. A lot of the activists that we protect and that we support are people who are using the internet, to denounce online authoritarianism, to denounce dictatorship, to denounce corruption, to denounce how the land are being grabbed, when they are indigenous people, climate defenders. And so they are the ones who also have to flee the country and who are coming into Thailand to hide. And most of the Thai activists also that we work with and democracy activists that we work with are also being, targeted by cyber laws in Thailand. Because as you know, we not only have the defamation law, so 112, but we also have the Computer Crime Act and other laws that are being misused by the Thai government to crack down on dissenting voices. And so it was really clear for us with the ASEAN Regional Coalition to Stop Dictatorship that there was a growing online authoritarianism that was happening in our region, not just in Thailand, but also in Myanmar, in Indonesia, throughout the region. And so we worked together for over 3 years, to document this trend and to alert the world that, hey, be careful, because online authoritarianism, it's only growing by governments, but also tech-colonialism is also growing by tech companies. And so we put all of that together in the report that we launched, all together in March 2024, last year, when we were alerting everybody about it. And actually, people were actually not necessarily listening to us. So you can access the report here also on our website. There's a global report, but there's also a country-based report where you can see the rise of online authoritarianism in each one of the ASEAN countries. And so we have already alerted and alarmed, the region and the world about the trend in Southeast Asia. And we had already told the world that our online democracy is under attack in Southeast Asia. And people were not necessarily listening to us. And we also warn about tech-colonialism, and we warn about the misuse of AI, how AI can be biased, how AI can be discriminatory. And if we keep promoting AI as a positive tool for economic development, which we all agree, and also as a positive tool to keep people safe, because that's how, for example, the Thai government is trying to brand AI as a positive tool to keep Thai people safe, that it can also be dangerous, especially when you're dealing with an authoritarian government and with a government that wants to crack down on democracy activists and on anyone speaking the truth to power. And so what we just saw coming during Songkran that was really alarming, or the Thailand launch of the AI police cyborg 1.0. So now in Thailand you have AI police that look like this. And so it's fun, you know, like when we saw it coming out, we were like, wow. And for the world, they might be like, wow, Thailand is so advanced. Like, you know, Thailand is so advanced, they now have AI police robot, they can keep the people safe. But for us, it's very dangerous because Thailand does not have the legal framework in place to make sure that AI is grounded in human rights standards. Thailand does not have the legal framework in place to make sure that our data will be protected and that those AI robots are not going to violate our human rights. And it's very, very dangerous because those AI police robots are a stationary surveillance robot equipped with 360-degree video, monitoring, with facial recognition, aggression and weapon detection, and real-time command center feedback. And all that is unregulated. So basically, they do whatever they want. It's even not only criminal suspects, which we want them to do, right? But also crowds, youth, and activists. And also what is also crazy is that the robot it's connected to Thailand's broader biometric surveillance state, and it also includes migrant scans and ARIS database. So it's really dangerous for people who understand how those robots actually have access to a lot of data. And so those robots are tapping into surrounding CCTV networks, you know, and drones. They analyze behavior that are unaccountable AI because they are unregulated, and they are supposedly programmed to differentiate between real threats and joyful and harmless acts. So basically, the robot is supposed to know if you are a threat, so if you are going to kill someone or steal something, or if you're having fun, like, you know, throwing water to people during Songkran. So this robot is supposed to know how to differentiate that. But the concern is that bias or poor programming could misqualify, you know, a harmful action behavior as dangerous, especially in political or activist context. So since, you know, we are doing work on digital rights, since we are documenting the rise of digital authoritarianism in Thailand, we have been also witnessing, you know, how the Thai government has been, like all government together, be it the yellow shirts, the red shirts, they all are using digital rights in the wrong way, and they're all cracking down on our digital rights. So we have seen them misusing cyber laws, and we have seen them misusing AI, and so we have no trust that those AI robots, police robots, are actually well programmed without any bias, and making sure that they can differentiate between a youth activist that is, you know, pro-democracy, protesting to abolish 112, and a real criminal. So, because for the Thai government, these are criminals. So this is the whole point for us, is that those AI robots are meant to protect us and to protect national security, but in the eyes of the Thai government, a youth activist, a democracy activist that is speaking his truth to power, that is calling for reforms, monarchy reforms, is casted as a criminal. So it means that he will be targeted as a criminal by this robot. So it means that this isn't just policing, it's preemptive profiling, it's happening without public consent, and it's without any oversight and without any regulation. So this robot doesn't make Thailand safer. For us, it makes repression faster, and it's really more automated and harder to challenge. So it's really making our world worse, and Thailand doesn't have, as explained, Thailand doesn't have a legal framework that protects us from bias and discrimination from AI. The PDPA doesn't cover algorithm bias, mass surveillance, or government use of AI, and there's no any specific AI law that protect our human rights. So AI should not be unchecked, should not be an unchecked force in Thailand. It must be developed on human rights principles at its core, and it's not what is happening right now. So the Thai government should not be celebrated for having those AI robot police now.
Thank you, Emily. So this is basically RoboCop.
Yeah.
A little bit earlier than we expected, and the fact that they keep telling us that this AI is going to be able to differentiate between what is dangerous and what's criminal and what's not. But actually, it is the people in charge, the elites in charge, who actually define the value of what is dangerous and what is not. And on that note, I'm going to bring in Michael Bach, Center for AI Leadership. And basically what Emily's been talking about is digital repression plus techno-colonialism. And this is what we want to hear from you, Michael. What do you mean by techno-colonialism? And how does this value, how does AI that's not centered on human rights values, how does it threaten us around the globe? Over to you, Michael.
Thanks, Debbie, and thank you for having me. And I do apologize, I'm not there in person. While I'm in Portugal at the moment, I normally am in Thailand, where I've been for a very, very long time. My remarks today are really derived from, the couple of decades of experience working both for USAID. I was there for 13 years, and also within big tech. I was with Facebook for 5 years before I went into civil society. I currently work with supporting governments in developing AI governance and ethics frameworks. And I have a very specific passion about centering Global South experts, expertise, and lived experience via civil society into the heart of international, regional, and national frameworks. I am very critical of the trajectory of technology, but I'm not a Luddite by any stretch of the imagination. But I do believe that we need to have a role in creating the governance frameworks to bend the trajectory of that technology. You'll hear me talk a lot about civil society and the free press and independent academia, which hasn't yet been bought by big tech, as critical countervailing forces within these governance systems, and what the demise of USAID has on that. I particularly draw a lot of inspiration from the work of Darren Acemoglu and Simon Johnson, who won the Nobel Prize in Economics last year. And they talk a lot about how the trajectory of technology is not inevitable. Despite what the billionaires may want you to believe, technology, the path of technology can be shaped and bent through public policy and through oversight and participation by countervailing forces. There's also a very good book by Mirka Madianu on techno-colonialism in the humanitarian space, and I draw some examples from that. Techno-colonialism is real, and the global majority must provide the leadership in how we govern technology so that we can mitigate the consequences of this dominant technology coming from the north. I'm going to share two key thoughts with you in this segment. One is about the very abrupt demise of USAID that Debbie and Emily have spoken to, and specifically what it means for the elimination of the funding and technical support to civil society around the world. It'll have a profound impact on weakening the ability of these countervailing forces to hold technology leaders accountable and to hold accountable all of this private power, and will weaken their ability to support policymakers in doing their job of ensuring that technology benefits society and benefits human flourishing. The second element is that these big tech pros are dangerous to us and societies around the world, both at the individual level, what we traditionally think of as the harms, these online safety issues harm us as people, but also the harms that are created at the systems level, which we often don't talk enough about. The systems of our democratic governance, cultural systems within our societies, language systems, and so forth. So my thoughts today are both a warning and an opportunity and a call to action. The technology is not going away, but we, policymakers, human rights defenders, civic leaders, feminist experts, the free press, independent academics, we must bend the trajectory of this technology in ways that we want, not in the ways that the tech oligarchy wants, but in the ways that benefit human and non-human flourishing. So let's be clear, where technology is heading is not inevitable. Just because something can be developed doesn't mean that it should, despite what they say. We have agency and power, and we need to exercise it. So what does it mean with this demise of USAID? We will see an erosion of the democratic accountability and increased authoritarian influence that governments can exercise through frontier technology and AI as it shifts from more inclusive human-driven models to these exclusive tech-driven models. And what I mean by that is that on the one hand, you have the application of technology that is influenced by living, breathing human beings who are experts in human rights law, in international humanitarian law, and have a deep connection to the communities they serve. So think about the thousands of USAID staff, and even more, think about the tens of thousands of civic leaders, community-based partners, organizations like Emily and others who are on the front lines directing where assistance and technology can be applied. And on the other hand, we have these tech-driven solutions that are largely designed by some dudes in Silicon Valley whose lived experience is so far removed from that of people on the move, people living with HIV, people from vulnerable populations, climate activists, and that has an implication on how the technology plays out. Oftentimes, the big tech aims for this techno-solutionism that you may have heard about. And it's all about efficiency, and that's the E in Doge's name that Debbie talked about earlier, Doge, which has eliminated USAID. But we also have to be clear that efficiency does not always mean justice. And in fact, we know this is the case. There are myriad examples of AI models that hallucinate, exert embedded bias, and discrimination against vulnerable people and minorities. And I don't think there's any place for AI in making unaccountable decisions that have either inclusionary or exclusionary impact on people in humanitarian crises. And with the demise of USAID, we'll see that the ability of people to intervene who have deep expertise and connection and who serve these countervailing roles won't be able to influence how this technology is used. When it comes to governance, I think we've already seen critical support to civil society being stripped away, which makes it even more difficult for civic actors to even show up at key policy moments where harms are identified and racked and stacked and policy priorities are determined. This is in stark contrast to the private sector and especially big tech, where money is no obstacle, where decisions to participate in a policy moment can be made at the last moment because there's always a business class ticket there waiting to be bought and a passport from the north that gets you through immigration quickly. It's not the case for civil society in our part of the world, where applying for visas can take months, never mind finding the resources to even buy a discounted economy class ticket to participate. So without USAID resources, how can NGOs participate? Even if they want to bring their own damn chair to the table, it's going to be especially more difficult now. Now combine that with the rising private power of technology companies. Without USAID and its funding directed towards local and community actors. You no longer have policies and service delivery being overseen by professionals with a human rights and humanitarian background. Instead, you have people like Elon Musk and his engineers who know nothing about international human rights law or humanitarian law, creating code that will have profound implications on the lives of myriad people, not only in the short run, but as I'll talk about shortly, potentially for the rest of their lives. You have companies sucking up information about how people live their lives, what they believe, who they love, how they struggle, what they advocate, who they oppose. All of this is collected, harvested, and AI is used to find correlations and connections that a human could never find. Now, some will argue that we've given our consent to have our information collected through apps and other products that we use. And I'd argue that consent is a slippery slope into oppression. So put it another way. Every day, we provide consent for something online. A new app, a new website, a health app, a fun app that shows us what we might look like 30 years from now. Banking applications, the list goes on. Think about the last time you clicked consent. Did you read the details? Probably not. In fact, surveys show that most people don't. And even if they do click through it, they spend about 12 seconds. Now, data that appears perfectly innocuous in one context, when combined with other data sets, can yield valuable insights that were previously not contemplated. And by valuable, it's not always valuable to us. What could it be? Health data, work histories, travel histories, experience as an asylum seeker or a refugee or a person on the move. All this information can be combined with other data sets and be used against you. A little thought experiment for you to think about. Let's say you want to enter the global north for a holiday, 10 years after you've experienced displacement and possibly temporary asylum abroad. Or maybe you, in fact, received bona fide refugee status. You've gotten a job, you have a family, you've become politically active. Maybe you criticize northern leaders for how they treat people on the move. You call it ethnic cleansing when you see it. You advocate for more diversity. You're aghast at what comes out of the mouth of the American president. Perhaps you criticize Israel's genocide of Palestinian people and culture, and you've suddenly been tagged now as an anti-Semite by American immigration authorities. Now you wonder why you might be getting a secondary screening at a point of arrival or denied a visa. Because in the world of AI, algorithms, and databases, data is never really gone. Biometrics that are collected and possibly combined with other data sets, they aren't deleted. And when you thought they would be deleted or firewalled from recombination with other data sets, you realize it's too late. The harm is caused. Just as Americans are now seeing how Elon is combining various data sets that shouldn't have come together, immigration, Social Security, the IRS, and so forth. So this perpetuates injustices by permanently tagging vulnerable people based on life experience from a certain point in their lifetime. And it creates a loss of agency and the inability of individuals to have parts of their life forgotten or freed from these harmful tags. This is techno-colonialism, when the extraction of data from vulnerable people is managed by tech elites and Western AI solutions, and there aren't countervailing forces at work to hold them to account, to demand transparency, and to shape the way technology is used so that it supports human and non-human flourishing. So I've talked about, how USAID assistance to civic actors is impacting the governance and the oversight. And at the same time, it'll risk removing the human from the decision loop. Think of USAID staff who might be deploying tools to help them make good decisions about how to deploy resources. This efficient automation takes the humanity out of many of those decisions. And at the same time, it allows actors to take critics off the street, remove the obstacles to what, technology companies might consider the inevitable trajectory of their tech. And at the same time allows them easier access to be able to collect and harvest more data. Now, it's easy to think that frontier technology is about our screens, our mobile phones, applications, but as Emily alluded to, it's also in areas like, biotech and robotics, and how this increasingly interlaces with people. A couple of examples. One is the use of robo-dogs at borders. We've seen this used in the US southern border with Mexico, on the Greek border with Turkey, where these robotic dogs are used to surveil for people who are on the move, to intercept them, and we have seen, in many cases where it preempts people from being able to file an asylum claim under international law at first instance. What's even more concerning is that this kind of surveillance tech is often tested in places like Gaza and the occupied West Bank. Indeed, Israeli technology firms often market their products as having been battle tested, and that tech is then made available to enforce borders in other places where vulnerable people find themselves on the move. It becomes, and this tech becomes, this surveillance becomes so useful that it risks becoming a permanent surveillance infrastructure that no one really governs because no one wants to give up their power they have to use it. And it, again, disproportionately impacts vulnerable groups. Think about the surveillance of, crowds or borders. That same technology can be used to surveil, say, immigration queues at airports, unofficial LGBTQ events, or other venues where the other gets in the way. And again, I want to emphasize that it's not just big tech that we need to be concerned with. There are, other technology companies, smaller ones, technology minnows that develop biometrics and other kinds of database tools that are used by organizations. So for example, the WFP and UNHCR have developed databases to biometrically register refugees and people receiving food assistance. The WFP Scopes database has over 63 million people registered in it. The UNHCR Primes database has over 21 million people as of 2021. Now, this helps to smooth out delivery of food, of cash payments, et cetera. But as we've seen in Kenya, for example, where the local Kenyan population was worse off than Somali refugees, you had Kenyan parents registering their children as refugees so that they could receive assistance. Now, years later, their children are not recognized as Kenyan citizens by the Kenyan government because those databases were shared with the Kenyan government. And there are, other examples. Which brings us back to Elon Musk combining databases and the dangers that creates for people. I think I've given a broad snapshot of how technology that is not governed through frameworks that demand explainability, accountability, transparency, and participation by people at all levels of society can result in real abuse and violation of our human rights, of our dignity, and makes it more difficult for people to flourish in the lives that they choose. And I think that's particularly important. And I'll leave it at that before we go into the next segment in the Q&A.
Thank you, Michael. You not only gave us a broad overview, you gave us a scary overview. Just like Emily did, the fact that the cuts to aid basically mean that civil society voices are not there at the table. And that absence contributes to, it worsens any design flaws in the tech, because it's civil society groups that come and warn, hey, this is, and just like Emily explained, that big report, hey, this is coming, this is a problem. And if those voices are not there, and those flaws continue, those biases continue, then the impacts become magnified. And when Michael was talking about a refugee, someone who's undocumented, who becomes a refugee, who becomes politically active, who opposes the genocide in Palestine because she is a genocide survivor herself. Michael, you were describing our next speaker, Yasmin Ullah. I mean, Yasmin, if Yasmin was going through those stages of her life now, she will never be able, probably, to get recognized as a refugee, able to resettle, able to get citizenship of another country, and able to exercise her political rights. And that techno-colonialism also means enforcing a digital caste system. So if you were a refugee or undocumented or illegal in some way in the eyes of some government, and that's documented in a database, it can follow you the rest of your life. And you will continually find it difficult to change your status no matter what. And that is what a caste system does. You're kind of stuck with it. And so Yasmin, I'm going to hand over the floor to you, because when we talk about threats, it's you and your community that are at the sharp end of this spear. Over to you.
Thank you so much, and thank you to Emily, and thank you for actually like painting the pictures of how our bleak future might look like. I think both of our esteemed panelists have already kind of mentioned the sort of bleak future that we're going to be dealing with in the next couple of while if we are going the path that we're going. I want to bring you back to what reality on the ground would look like when these techno-colonialism are in full effect. And two scenarios that I want to highlight is actually in Bangladesh and in Indonesia. So I hope that you will follow along in all of this very, very tragic developments that we have. In Bangladesh, the recent cuts by DOGE to the USAID is exactly the death sentence that the refugees are actually going to be living through. Over 1.4 million Rohingya that are currently living in Cox's Bazar in a very crowded camps with precarious conditions and dwindling funds to support their everyday life, food rations, sanitary projects, and various other livelihood issues. With 60% of Rohingya being women and children, these are the target or the demographic that DOGE cut has actually targeted. A Rohingya refugee had told Reuters not too long ago that we can't work outside the camp and the rations we're getting are barely enough. If they reduce it even further, crime will increase and people will do anything to survive. And this is the reality on the ground. Basically, the freezing of the funds have forced the US-funded hospitals to reduce services. And I want you to remember that this is not just you go into the hospital and you get the services right away, you get seen immediately. There are hundreds, if not thousands, of refugees that are already lining up every morning, waiting to be seen, to get the paracetamol or some kind of Tylenol or some kind of pain relief. A lot of times these hospitals are not fully equipped either. They're just primary care taker of the refugees' population. If they're already reducing services, you can imagine how much more difficult it would be for Rohingya refugees to actually have to try to get outside of the camps to go and find some kind of hospital that will take them. Again, we're dealing with discriminatory policies and practices that are also, segregating Rohingya population from being able to access these hospitals. On top of that, funding is also an issue. Not a lot of these refugees will have money to be able to go. They get rice and lentils every day from the food rations from WFP. So about 48 health facilities have closed down, including 11 primary care centers. All of these have been affected, leaving so many refugees without access to essential care. This has gone on to affect 300,000 Rohingya refugees in the camps alone. This is just the very, very beginning of the Doge cuts and what effects it has. And I'm going to quote another Rohingya leader here. He said, "Our food, healthcare, and education system are collapsing. If this gets out of hand, it will not just be a problem for Bangladesh, but it will become a global problem." Why? Because Rohingya refugees, when they're pushed to the brink of annihilation from both sides, from all aspects of life, from every single government that they're trying to seek help from, what do? They'll jump into a boat to try to leave and go to another country, because that's human survival. We will try to find ways to actually protect our parents, our children, our sisters, our brothers, our families. That is something that all of us will do here if we were put into that situation. Given that the rations have been cut from $12 to $6, again, per month, you cannot buy a pack of noodles with that amount of money, as Debbie has said before. Families are put into very, very desperate circumstances. Rising malnutrition in children have become a main concern among others. And this and other services have been cut, have forced basically the Rohingya parents, especially mothers, to decide to take this dangerous journey, as I've mentioned, through the Andaman Sea in hopes of survival and in hopes that their children will have a better future than they do, in hopes of finding access and support for their children. However, when they get to another side of the Andaman Sea, they made it through the journey that could last 2 weeks to 3 months if they're not lost at sea, with turbulence over and over, and starvation on the boat and potential sexual and gender-based violence that they'd have to deal with. They get to Indonesia. Over the years, the Rohingya initially were arriving sporadically throughout the calmer months at sea due to the violence in Burma, and as I've mentioned and painted the picture, in Bangladesh with dwindling funds and aid. The situation, however, has changed rapidly in the past couple of years, since 2023 in November. And UNHCR, main agency currently caring for the community, have basically said that the rising in online attacks against Rohingya is not an isolated act, but a result of coordinated online campaign of misinformation, disinformation, and hate speech. And this was starting to become an issue, a viral, sensational moment after a sensationalized news headline of the new arrival during the late November 2023 was basically fanned and went viral on social media. The anti-Rohingya videos later on were spreading throughout the late part of 2023, and some were AI generated. These videos were circulated throughout all platforms, X, Meta, and TikToks. What kind of videos are these, you might ask? Some of these videos were actually racking up like 90 million views on TikTok and other platforms. And in November 2023, according to the Bandung Faye Institute in Indonesia, some of the most viewed videos were peddling misinformation, showing overcrowded vessels claiming to be ships carrying Rohingya to Indonesia. But the footage was, even though viewed so many times on TikTok, actually showed ferry passengers on domestic Bangladesh routes, according to AFP fact-checked investigation. Another video claiming Rohingya damaging an East Java refugee center, more than 23,000 kilometers away from Aceh, which is where Rohingya are currently concentrated. An AFP fact-checked investigation found that the claim was not true. And the authorities themselves said these were not Rohingya. But it's already gone viral. The Rohingya reputation has already been damaged. And you can see in some of these comments, some of these were directed at us. A lot of the Rohingya women in my collective or in the Rohingya Maya Fauna Collaborative Network are actually refugees themselves. We've all been displaced at some point in Southeast Asia. I was raised here in Thailand. I've gone through many, many phases of Rohingya attacks, even in Thailand and Malaysia and Indonesia. The issue is when these are sprung and swung at Rohingya women and children, it actually manifests into something much, much more cynical. SafeNet actually found that women were the most frequent targets of hate speech and abusive language. Among many were LGBTQ and Rohingya. And political actors, this is where the reasoning gets a little bit more connected to the previous panelist. Political actors were using anti-Rohingya coordinated online attacks as a way to securitize ASEAN, not just against foreign enemy or terrorist. This rings true to the war on terror type of myth and rhetoric that was used long time ago. It's still circulating to this day. Whenever Rohingya in exile are used as a common enemy, we see democratic backsliding followed suit. In many different countries, if you see that there is securitization against refugees, you can almost guarantee the prediction of democratic backsliding and swinging to the right, and populism following suit. And we heard in Indonesian election last year, the same sentiments that Indonesians come first, and that only those politicians can protect Indonesians from the harm caused by Rohingya refugees. Prabowo, the current president himself, has been the most outspoken against the Rohingya, and his recent comments at that time said that Indonesian assistance toward Rohingya shouldn't come at the expense of the citizens. But who's actually bearing the cost of those assistance? UNHCR, IOM, and organizations like ours, who've actually been helped with, been helped by ALTSEAN Burma and MINUSHA and other members in the coalition. We bear the cost. And somehow this is against the national security of Indonesia. It is all too familiar what we are hearing and what's circulating. It is the exact same loop that we're currently living through. The misinformation, disinformation, and hate speech campaign that we're seeing was also used at one point in Burma, Myanmar, leading up to the clearance operation and the genocidal campaigns against Rohingya in 2016 and 17. The justification is all the same. Rohingya are a threat. They're too much like terrorists. They're too dark, too black. You see in all of these comments, the Rohingya are being painted. I remember there was, I'll leave Debbie to talk about the new documentary that's coming out on the Rohingya hate in the region. But Wirathu, who was the monk that incentivized the entire country to actually hate the Rohingya and justify the genocide, he called us Rohingya or Muslim are black African carp. That's already a dehumanizing language. And we will see the exact same sentiment by Indonesians and Malaysians who call Rohingya too black, too dark to be saved, and too useless, and having too many kids. And again, like none of the women in my organization actually have any kids, so that's already false.
You have cats. You have cats.
We have cats.
You have fur kids.
Those are our babies. But these are the reality. If I go to Indonesia and Malaysia today, and this is the funny part that I just could not get over, people will start speaking to me in Bahasa Melayu or Bahasa Indonesia, and they will assume that I'm part of the country. And here I am seeking belonging in Burma, Myanmar, and cannot find the right place to be, while these people hate on us online without real reasoning behind it, but then couldn't even dissect or differentiate who is Rohingya and who's not. So who are they really hating? It's this myth of a person or a group of people that they deem as dangerous and threats to national security. And it ties back to both of the speakers earlier that these are not real sentiment that actually represent human interactions every single day. It comes from technology that has basically primed us to and pit us against one another. And so I will end with this. AI and misinformation, disinformation, and hate speech that are currently suppressing, oppressing, and discriminate against Rohingya are actually disuniting the people in the region. And the result in this is that we can see it in the current policies that continue to ignore ASEAN complicity in our genocide and many other violence that have now been widespread in Burma, Myanmar by the junta. And in excluding Rohingya from the actual narratives, from seeking justice and from being able to seek refuge in the region, because we are the closest neighbor, this is in our front yard, it also excludes children, Rohingya children, who have very basic real needs of actually being protected. And the conventions have been signed by all of these ASEAN countries, but somehow Rohingya children are excluded from those treaties. While online hate also manifests into real-life violence, where Rohingya are being beaten up and shown online, and terrorizing Rohingya is actually something that makes someone popular in the region, we also see the pushing back of the boats that could have saved someone becomes a common theme every single time Rohingya try to disembark. The lack of political willingness to address humanitarian needs of Rohingya and Rohingya refugee inclusion is also the reality now that we have to grapple with, that we need to beg the authorities to save someone's lives. I'll leave you with this one story. It was because of the online hate sentiment that was actually widespread in November 2023 that a young Rohingya mother who was 25, who had 2 children with her, she carried both children from Bangladesh because she couldn't see a viable solution for their survival. That's why she risked their lives and hers to come to Indonesia. She took those boat journey. It took about 2 weeks to a month. The boat, when it was trying to disembark in Indonesia, was pushed back at sea twice. Not one time, twice. Her child was sick in her arm, the youngest, 2-year-old. He starved and he was extremely, extremely malnourished and was at the brink of death. They were allowed to disembark the first time with a lot of resistance from the local because of the hate speech. The second time, after they were fed and given some water, they were put back on the boat to leave. The engine died, the fuel ran out, the boat was adrift for 3 days. Those mobs that gathered pushed them back, driving her and her children away. The sad part is, this 25-year-old mother did not know if she would see the land again, so when her child passed in her arm, she decided to bury the child in the ocean. None of us should have to make that kind of choice for our children. None of us. But this is the reality of what technology and techno-colonialism can do to people. It separates us from having empathy for each other, from being able to care for a child who's really, really sick and needing assistance and support. The safest refuge for my community, unfortunately, is in the ocean. And I really, really, truly hope that we can we can turn the tide and change this and make ASEAN the safer place for everyone, not just for Rohingya. Thank you.
Thank you, Yasmin. And so now we have Emily showing us that the combination of the aid cuts and the rise of unregulated, unchecked artificial intelligence technology, this embrace is actually turned creeping authoritarianism into galloping authoritarianism in this region. Michael has shared how the how the aid cuts basically mean one vital check and balance to AI development, which is the voice of civil societies, that urges caution, that shows evidence from the ground where the design flaws are, where the biases are, the impacts of those biases, is no longer at the table because of the USAID cuts, and that these systems, these surveillance border control systems, basically may put someone in a pigeonhole that they can never get out of. And that techno-colonialism also means that authoritarian states and big tech, even small tech, will dictate what development is. Not a human-centered development, not a development that's meant to preserve planet and reduce poverty, but their own view of development. And Yasmin has shared with us at the very deeply personal level what this means to her and her community. So the threat is there. We've been feeling it. People are not even pretending. They are acting openly with celebrating their own impunity. And so how do we resist? What are the alternatives? And this is an important round, because don't go away scared and depressed. There is a solution. There is a way forward. And I want to hear first from Emily.
I think following on what Yasmin has shared, I think the first thing that we really need is really true solidarity. And that's what we have been lacking, be it within the civil society field, but also, from the development field. It feels that solidarity has been for many years an act of charity, coming from NGOs to, local groups like us. It feels like solidarity has been from the UN side, inviting us to speak and tick the box of, I invited this feminist, I invited this Rohingya woman. And I think what is happening, now with the USAID cuts and techno-colonialism is that we really need true solidarity. And when we mean it, it's like we really need true solidarity. We know how to show up for each other. We know how to give solidarity to one another, but we feel that most of people in development field do not understand what solidarity truly means. And so I'd like to go to what are the solutions for AI and what are the solutions for true solidarity that would decolonize it and decolonize the digital space. So first, it's clear that for us, AI should not be an unchecked force in Southeast Asia. I think the experiences and the case studies shared by Yasmin is a perfect example for you to see how a genocide can be perpetrated because of unchecked AI. It's happening to the Rohingya community. It's happening to our brothers and sisters in Palestine. It's happening now to our friends in Kashmir, Pakistan. It's happening in Congo, in Sudan. Unchecked AI is killing people on the ground. So it's really important for people to understand that, and we must build AI on human rights, not surveillance and not control. Technology should not be a weapon in the hands of the authoritarian governments. Technology should not be a weapon in the hands of the 1% powerful rich man in the US or the 1% here in Southeast Asia. It should not be a tool that is going to cast us as enemies, threats to national security. It's not normal that our Rohingya friends or us as feminist activists are being cast as threat to national security because of the work that we do and because of the identity of the people that we are. It's just not normal. And technology should never be a tool for domination. It should be a tool for liberation. And in order for technology to be a tool for liberation, we actually need true solidarity from all of you. So now let me try to explain to you what I mean by solidarity. I'm going to use the solidarity framework that we have at the symposium, the Bismani. Because even within the field, when we talk about solidarity, we also need to agree what solidarity means. But this is my perception of solidarity, and some other is that for solidarity, we call it the 4Ds, right? So it's about difference, differences, disagreement, and decolonialism. So if you really want to stand in solidarity with us, and that's what we need you to do, is to stand in solidarity with us, you need to defer your power to those on the front line of the struggle. It means deferring the power to the Rohingya activists, deferring the power to anyone on the ground, deferring the power to the refugees, to the political activists, to the youth democracy activists, to us, being at the front line of the struggle and being at the front line of the fight. People cannot dictate to us what aid should look like nowadays. You actually need to defer the power to us and ask us what type of decolonized aid do you need? What type of support do you need? How can we show up for you? How can we make sure that your people are not being killed because of unregulated AI? So you need to defer the power back to the people on the ground. You need to defer the power back to us. The second one is differences. You need to embrace differences. You know, the fact that people in Indonesia are pushing the votes of Rohingya communities, the fact that you have people also in Indonesia that can stand in solidarity with Palestine but who cannot stand in solidarity with the Rohingya people, it's because they do not embrace differences. You know, the fact that you have people in Myanmar that are against homosexuality and LGBTI people in Myanmar, in Malaysia, or Indonesia, is because they do not embrace differences. So in order to stand in solidarity, you really need to embrace differences. And you also need to be able to agree to disagree, which is the third D. We will not always agree, but when we stand in solidarity, when we defer power to those on the front lines, when we embrace differences, even if we don't agree with those that we have to defer power to, we need to agree to disagree, because in the end of the day, they are the ones deciding. So when we are seeking solidarity from all of you, when we keep telling you this is happening, like we launch reports and we tell the world this is happening, we keep being invited to speak about it. You know, people travel us, thanks to USAID funding before. People used to travel us all around the world, you know, to share our findings and to say this is a threat. But the reality is that we are living those threats. We are living those attacks, and now we don't even have the money for it. And so it also has to be decolonial. And what I mean by decolonial is that we need to stop being used as a tick the box exercise for governments, for the UN, for any NGOs that wants to look good in terms of, you know, doing the development world. In the development world, I'm just going to give you an example. I was invited a few days ago to speak at the OECD Civil Society Days in Paris on 18-19 June. So I received this invitation. You're invited to speak. We would like you to speak at this panel on civil society in a turbulent world. So I'm like, if they invite me, they must have checked, you know, that Manusha has lost USAID funding, that we are being targeted, that, you know, we actually need funds. But so I automatically thought that an organization like the OECD, that is so well funded and, you know, by governments, will automatically pay for my flights and my participation. And actually, no. So they wrote to me saying, here is a visa letter if you need one, and let us know about your logistics. I'm like, what do you mean? By let us know about the logistics. I thought you were paying for my participation. And so, you know, it's a very colonial mindset to think that I should be honored and thrilled to be invited at the OECD to speak about what is happening on the ground. They should be honored to have me going there, you know, giving my time to tell them what's happening on the ground, where I should actually be working and protecting refugees and activists who are hiding in Thailand. And so this really colonial mindset, you really need to shift, because we are the expert on the ground and we should stop being used as puppets in the development field. And so what we really need is a decolonized aid that is built by us for us. And I like to quote, you know, Audre Lorde, because I love this quote when she says that the master's tools will never dismantle the master's house. It's really, really important for us to understand that we are now the ones who need to rebuild the development aid. And we actually already in Southeast Asia, in our culture, already have examples of how we can support each other. You know, we have what we call, we have our mothers like to play tontine, you know? Tontine, I'm sure you know about it. It's like we help each other, you know, with funds, but also we also have what we call give what you can and take what you need, which is really important for us. We don't want philanthropy that is based on charity anymore, like, oh, we are the wealthy from the West, or we are the wealthy from Asia, here's some money for you so you can do your human rights work. But actually we need like horizontal, grounded on the earth-based, culturally rooted philanthropy. So it's really about give what you can, take what you need. Everyone contributes based on their skills and we can support each other. And we really need space to come together to rethink what does aid would mean for us now that we can no longer rely on foreign aid, but we need to rely on ourselves. And we are our own saviors in the end of the day, and we should stop thinking that the West is going to support us with the funds, but we will be the ones, bringing up and pushing for ourselves to survive. And so for that, we need your solidarity, everyone here in the room. A lot of you are expat, living in Thailand. So if you can amplify our voices, if you can help those on the ground, if you can stand in solidarity with us by differing your power, embracing our differences, agree to disagree with us, but also please always have a decolonial mindset, because we are done and tired of being colonized. Thank you.
Thank you, Emily. True solidarity, build artificial intelligence on human rights, and tech for liberation, not oppression. Michael, what are your solutions? What's possible?
Emily just said, we are living these attacks, we are living these threats, and we being people in the global majority. And I think that's really something to bear in mind, because as this technology turns inwards, I think that Northerners are going to be looking towards those in the global majority who have this experience living the attacks and living the threats to help forge a path forward. And Emily's OECD example, unfortunately, I imagine her spot was probably taken by someone from a company, a corporate lawyer, or a public policy person to give their line. And unfortunately, that prevented the kind of solidarity that can evolve that Emily was speaking to. And my solution, what I think a lot about, is around governance and how we can bend technology in the direction that is beneficial to society and not necessarily to shareholders, that it benefits human and non-human flourishing so that we can thrive in the lives that we want to create and that are right for us. And remember, we're not speaking exclusively about these big tech companies, because there are a vast array of tech minnows out there, and it's the combined effects on our lives, societies, and institutions that we need to be concerned about and work to address. And I saw one of the comments on the FCCT page. It's not just U.S., European tech companies. There's a whole conversation to be had around Chinese tech and Chinese companies and kind of the model that they're trying to create. And I think that's another big discussion. I also think that it's important to recognize that a world where authoritarianism and oppression are bolstered by technology does not necessarily require that people need to want to create this. What I mean is that without the public oversight of technology and this innovation, without civic actors providing oversight, 1,000 technologies might combine to create an oppressive environment when each one of those technologies on their own seem perfectly reasonable to us. That app that you took the picture of yourself to see what you looked like 30 years from now, all that data, your biometrics can be sold off to the highest bidder. And also remember that the values and the morals that are baked into technology are neither inevitable nor immutable. They can be chosen, they can be changed, they can be updated and made relevant to our cultures and our societies. And we must all be a part of shaping that. It means that when we engage as civic actors, that we challenge this notion of balancing innovation with regulation. I personally think it's kind of BS, but it's a really great marketing tool that corporate interests have somehow convinced regulators and policymakers to accept as a sort of a baseline fact. But the truth is, when it comes to AI and other powerful frontier technologies, the equation is quite different. If it doesn't serve our flourishing, then we have to ask ourselves if it's innovation worth pursuing. And that's where having frameworks where civic actors, people from vulnerable communities, from a diverse range of lived experiences, can participate as a countervailing force to ensure that this technology bends in the right direction. Now, I've been thinking, to wrap up, I've been thinking a lot recently about what I call a moral lighthouse for governance frameworks of technology. And I don't mean it from a religious perspective, but I mean it one from a kind of indigenous wisdom, cultural traditions that exist, and how we should leverage that rich culture and wisdom to strengthen our governance frameworks. And I'll give you two examples to think about. One is from Aotearoa, New Zealand, where they've developed data protection frameworks, and they've included Maori, traditional Maori wisdom and principles. One of which, for example, is, and I forget the Maori word, I apologize, is that data has a genealogy, which makes us think very differently about how we treat that data if we think about the genealogy behind it. It's not just a 1 and a 0 that someone is consented to give in one instance. A second example comes from indigenous cultures, some indigenous cultures in North America, called the 7th generation principle, where leaders are encouraged, are required to think about the impact of their decision 7 generations down the road. How many policymakers in the North, where, let's face it, a vast majority of lighthouse initiatives around governance are being developed, take these kinds of things into consideration. And I think that's worthy of us thinking about, and it's worthy of us to put forward as legitimate elements of discussion within these governance frameworks. And of course, Emily's talked about the need for funding for civic actors so that governance truly can be bottom up and not top down, so that we can draw on this local indigenous wisdom and knowledge and tradition and experience from around the world. And again, that we eschew this notion that regulation inhibits innovation, or that we somehow have to balance the two. We can reject that, because if that innovation doesn't serve our flourishing, then it's an innovation that we don't need. And I'll leave it at that. It's not a perfect solution, but I think it's one that speaks to what Emily was saying about exercising agency, bringing forward these core elements of our individual lived experience and our cultural and social lived experience, for lack of a better term, to the table, to be absolutely important ingredients to how we develop frameworks that will govern and bend technology in the direction we want.
Thank you, Michael. So we're looking at one of the key solutions that he's proposing is strengthening the governance and the regulation of tech. And we talk about governance, we're talking about democratizing tech governance to be inclusive of the people who might be the most vulnerable to negative impacts, to be able to bring the voices of people who see things, to create a 360-degree perspective, and even changing the culture of tech, using the wisdom of what's the impact 7 generations down the track, actually changing the cultural thinking around tech, and understanding that innovation is not of itself is not innovation if it doesn't help humanity flourish. So I think this is going to be quite important to understand that we can't be trapped into a dichotomy of innovation versus regulation. That's a red herring. It's a fake picture. And so that's something that's also really important. I just wanted to reply to the comment of a friend on the Facebook page about why are we picking on Western tech and not Chinese tech. And I want to say something. It was Facebook and not what's the Chinese equivalent? I forget.
Weibo?
Weibo. It was Facebook and not Weibo that actually created and intensified the conditions that contributed to the Rohingya genocide. It's been proven. There's at least one PhD thesis on it and quite a few reports. So I want to say that, but it doesn't mean that we are questioning only Western tech. In fact, there's been a lot of activism from us collectively against the Chinese facial recognition and gait recognition tech that's actually being given to the illegal and brutal junta in Burma. So our capacity to resist a bad tech, whether it's from China, US, or from Shah Alam in Malaysia, who knows what they get up to there in Malaysia, our capacity to question, to research, and to resist is totally undermined by the fact that a traditional donor has pulled out, not just cut the aid. They didn't say, hello, excuse me, got bad news for you, we don't like you, so this is what we're gonna do, you got 3 months to get out of our system. It was literally overnight. So I think that's something that's quite horrific, that it's not about us being anti-US tech or anti-European tech. It's us being questioning harmful tech regardless of where it comes from. And our capacity to resist, question, and research that is actually undermined by this cut. So I think we have to clarify that. Now I want to give the floor to Yasmin about where you see the solutions are. How can we fight back?
Very, very difficult question to answer. And I think, at least from our part as a Rohingya women-led and refugee-led and community-led organization, our existence alone is a resistance against a system that is so rampant with donor-driven agenda and, sort of the hand above and hand below type of dynamic where we're only the receivers and we're not really ever be able to be reliant on ourselves or express our self-agency. Lots of these, twisted idea of who refugees and vulnerable communities are being perpetuated, in large part by tech. And as an organization, we exist because, again, with Debbie, of course, being the proponent of making that happen. I need to give credits where it's due. But a very, very clear example of this, and I urge you to actually go online and search Rohingya women online right now. Go check it out and see how many real Rohingya women who are actually expressing or doing something that shows their agency show up. The last couple of years, or the few years ago that the crisis or the genocidal campaign were in full force, it's still ongoing today, but you're seeing less and less of it because of tech, because of the sensationalized news headline and where the attention, the global attention span is. But if you go see it today, majority of those pictures are still helpless women crying, or babies crying, or people begging. But are they really the picture on the ground? Are they really the ways that Rohingya are currently operating? We are a very collectivist society, an agrarian society as well. We are able to we've been able to actually take care of ourselves and survive through genocide for many, many decades before the world came to know of it. The issue is tech has not really, represent the community very well. And on top of that, it does not contribute to aid that are delivered in a way that dignifies people. And so our existence alone is a testament to the resistance of that type of dynamic. We exist as a community, as a collective of 8 women. We're a very small collective, but still small and mighty, hopefully. The global network that we have is working to try to overturn some of that picture, some of that representation that you see. Because a lot of these women that are working with me are actually educated, very well spoken, very eloquent, can speak English. Apparently that's also very important because of the colonial nature of the world. But also they're leaders in their own rights. They've done a lot for the community, but you won't see them unless we actually push them forward. So what we do is not just doing this hand over hand dynamic where we're now, in the Western countries have different accents in the West, Australian, Canadian, American, and stop there. We actually come back to our own community because we're trying to reconnect back to our indigenous roots, which is, we need to take care of ourselves. We need to take care of our community. When we do that, we don't just give out aid and deliver food or water or shelter or pillows or mats that people actually need in the interim when they disembark, where we fill in the gaps of, that INGOs could not step in right away. We also, in other times when things calm down, we try to progress towards education, capacity building, vocational training, and training communities to actually be first responders themselves. We ensure that it is a women and gender forward kind of program. So we ensure that women are the biggest part of our programs. We ensure that we have education program for lifelong learners, for women who've been excluded from education system in Burma, Myanmar, later on in Bangladesh, and now in Indonesia. We ensure that they're now able to read and write, at least for them to be able to engage or read the letters that authorities send them. That is empowering in its own. There are also now programs on the ground, which is called Threats of Resilience. And we do this workshop, and we're in the very early stage of this. We do this workshop where we train 10 women on sewing and skills. And these women actually completed the program already in the past few months. They're given the sewing machine that they were using in the program. They're now opening their shops, and they're completely self-reliant. That is the model of aid that we should aim towards. They need to be able to not just receive aid on a day-to-day basis. They need to be rid of themselves from being completely reliant on aid. So right now, they're not affected by the aid cut because they have business. Business is actually doing well. And so that's one way that we actually try to decolonize some of this aid delivery or donor-driven society that we live in. We also work on trying to train young people in the community in refugee camps in Indonesia to actually be first responders when it comes to mental health crisis. And these are teenagers who are so, thirsting, they're really hungry for work and for knowledge, that they're more than willing to go through a few weeks of programs with registered counselors and psychologists. And they're now doing their work. They're doing their part to actually help the community manage and mitigate the stresses of everyday life as refugees. The other part, and I'm going to try to end with this, is the hate speech that you saw on the screen earlier. They are the smaller part of what we do. We try to resist against those hate by not just showing up as Rohingya women, as strong, very, very strong-willed, bunch of women who might piss off a lot of people. But at the same time, we're also trying to use it as a tool. We're not just taking the hate and basically argue back, although we want to do that a lot of times. We actually use them as a tool to educate and to teach others. And thankful to Manusha for actually helping us funding that. That is what solidarity looks like. It's not just, oh, I feel so bad for you, I'll pray for you. Well, that's not enough anymore, is it? I really, really hope that we can continue to do this work in a large part, as a solidified, unit We have differences, as Emily and Michael has already mentioned. When we take human out of technology, this is what happened. We're completely disunited. We're completely, fallen apart. But ways that Manusha has also supported us was beyond just data collection that help us to be able to resist against hate. We were also able to use some of those funding to support Rohingya women who arrived in Aceh, through their dangerous boat journey. 6 of them that were raped by the trafficker on board the boat. They came in, they basically disembarked to Aceh or on Aceh pregnant. And you know how Sharia law is implemented in Aceh. So we could not really seek abortion or reproductive health care for them. But what we could do at that time, without being able to do anything else, we were able to support them to find safe housing and support them throughout all of the times during their pregnancy until they gave birth about 3 months ago. Without this kind of solidarity and sort of horizontal relationship in terms of aid delivery and system, we would not have been able to help them. We would not have been able to support any of their needs. On top of that, they got counseling during their pregnancy. We were also able to use some of the funding to support 81 unaccompanied minors because their parents were lost, separated from them, or they passed during the capsizing of the boat last year in April. All of this would not have been possible without the solidarity that we've tried to emphasize today, but also the fact that we're trying to create something new, something that actually dignify people, something that lift people up rather than keep them suppressed and reliant on aid forever, because aid ends. And that is, I think, now we have a window of opportunity. I'm not just coming here to tell you tragic stories. We have a window of opportunity that's very important. We can restructure aid delivery system. We can try to ensure that whatever new system that we're going to try to come up with together actually help people build their life sustainably. That these 6 women or many other young children that we are supporting that don't have parents, or these women that are actually learning ABCs for the first time while scrubbing dishes in the camps in a plastic tent on the beach somewhere in Indonesia, have a place, democratizing of aid, have a place in this movement to actually tell their stories, but also tell us what they need themselves. Lastly, instead of listening to Doge or any other governments who have a lot of power and influence, listen to us, invest in us. We actually know what to do in all of these dire circumstances. We just don't have enough resources to be able to mobilize. If I have 2 million, and one can hope, I will be able to do so much more. And those programs I can guarantee, for the most part, with transparency and the commitment to the community, we'd be able to do so much more to help prevent hate, but also to connect the communities together and help them live their life sustainably wherever they're in exile or whatever kind of vulnerabilities we're dealing with. We would be able to maximize the aid or the investment that is given. Thank you.
Thank you, Yasmin. I'm not going to try and summarize the amazing work that Rohingya women are doing to help their community when given the chance. But I want to say it's going from our existence is resistance to we exist to resist. And that's a powerful thought to have. I'd like to open the floor to any questions or comments, and I've already responded to one of the key things that was raised in the Facebook Live, and I would also encourage you to help yourself to the very yummy food and the hot beverages at the back. Do we have any questions? Yes, please go to the microphone at the back and let us know. So.
Yeah, hi, good afternoon. My name is Imtiaz Muqbul. I'm the executive editor of Travel Impact Newswire. I actually cover the travel and tourism industry. but a lot of the stuff that you have mentioned today is very relevant to that, particularly the hate speech and the impact this has on cultures, which is diametrically opposite to what the travel and tourism industry tries to do, which is to promote friendship, harmony, peace, travel, based on the cultures that are now being damaged by all this hate speech that is going on speech. But I had two questions. One is it's actually directed to Michael, but I would welcome the other panelists. One is you mentioned several times Elon Musk and the power that he has. One of the things that is emerging from this whole issue, words probably which were not mentioned, is the impact of all this technology on national sovereignty. Essentially, countries talk about having restricted policy space to make decisions, but when you look at what's going on today, things like elections are now eventually becoming a bit of a farce, because many of a lot of the data that can be mined by these technology companies can be used to drive the outcomes of elections. With predictive analytics, you can actually now predict who is going to vote and how, and learn, and the political parties can now learn to understand how to press which buttons in order to get the outcomes that they expect. What does that then mean for national sovereignty as countries begin to basically fall victim to the fact that the people who control the data, which is now referred to as the new oil, can actually drive the outcome of elections? So essentially that makes democracy pretty much of a farce. That's one issue. The other one is, of course, now we look at, if we are seeing today the weaponization of tariffs, what could this also mean for the weaponization of technology in future? Somebody could just switch the light off someday, and basically countries would come to an entire stop simply by cutting the satellite connections, which is also falling into the hands of people like Elon Musk. So these are, of course, core issues, but when it comes to governments, literally what you're talking about is that the future of national sovereignty, countries will cease to exist as they are right now, if this kind of decision maker falls out of the hands of people. So when we talk about resources, and as she says, we listen to us and invest in us, where exactly which aspect of this do we actually invest in to get this people power that we need to resist these forces, which now seem to be almost like unstoppable in some respect? So that's really directed at you, but I'd welcome Emily and Yasminullah as well. Thanks.
Thank you, Imtiaz. Before we go to Imtiaz's question, I saw a hand in this side. Yeah, please come and ask the question, and then we'll respond, and then we'll take the next round if anyone's interested in asking.
Hi, thanks. My name's Annalise McAuliffe. I've worked with a few people in this room on AI governance, misinformation, disinformation, including working very closely with Yasmin. This question is actually for Michael. Hi, Michael. It's about AI governance, and it's about small tech rather than big tech, because as we know, or as we're becoming more aware, a lot of the functions of government are being outsourced to AI companies. So you have a company like Blackbird AI or Fivecast working with Homeland Security, immigration. So you actually have these companies working in London or DC or Canberra, scraping data from all over the world without any cultural knowledge, using often, small language models to create response systems for government. So how does AI governance work in that way? Because these are kind of proprietary algorithms that are in-house with small tech that are now leading the response of government into this kind of scenario that we're looking at in terms of surveillance. And then these companies are staffed primarily by two different types of people. They are your tech people who are doing all the programming, and then they are kind of former security services people who are doing the sort of modeling and predictive analysis and stuff like that. So AI governance, where should it be done? If it's done at the state level, where's the compliance? If it's done at the international level, again, where's the buy-in?
Okay, there's a three-part question from Imtiaz, mainly focused on the impact on national sovereignty, especially how AI may drive outcomes of elections and push politicians into pushing certain buttons. What happens? When weaponization of tech, what happens if someone pulls the plug? An analyst is asking about AI governance. At what level should it happen, especially when it comes to small tech? So I'm going to give you the floor, Michael, and then I will pass the microphone on to Emily and Yasmin. Michael, you ready?
Yep. Thank you, and thanks for the really easy questions. These are big questions, and what you laid out, I think, is absolutely a reality and possibility. When I think about, data sovereignty and control of data, I think about it maybe a little bit different in that, who's controlling that data is very important. What's also extremely important is who is able to apply artificial intelligence to extract insights from that data, insights that would otherwise be very difficult for a human being to do on our own. Correlations, which don't necessarily equate to causation, but can be easily misinterpreted by these. This is where governance is particularly important, and it's particularly important for policymakers in the Global South to have the courage to stand up to big corporations, particularly those from the North that have a monopoly or oligopoly of some of this technology. And it's a struggle because on the one hand, much like campaign finance, money can be addictive, and policymakers or elected officials may be averse to regulating out that financing. It's not impossible. We do see enlightened policymakers who create the mechanisms to bring diverse viewpoints and experiences to the table to develop regulatory frameworks and processes. And I think that the moment is absolutely critical now for those in the South to be able to do that with respect to these technological innovations that are being imported. Think about it this way, and the challenges are substantial. Think about it this way. A typical member of parliament in, say, France or Belgium or the United States will have a staff of experts on their team. A Congress member in the US may have a data expert, a labor expert, a diversity expert, whatever. In our part of the world, oftentimes member of parliaments have only, a scheduler who helps them schedule their meetings and provide admin support. And there's so much onus on the MP to be able to consume all this information. And when they're confronted with, a professional government affairs person or public policy person who tells a very good story, the economic benefits of these platforms in particular, because it sells very well. It's easy to say, okay, well, that sounds great. Now I need to move on to, the labor issue that I'm dealing with because this story sounds really good. Having a good governance framework which allows independent academics, the media, civic voices to be able to support these policymakers and elected officials to understand these complex problems and to give them the courage to be able to say to a company, thanks, but we approach this a bit differently. We understand this differently. This is impacting our society in different ways, and therefore we are going to make some decisions around that. I know this is not a perfect answer, but I think that the process of a kind of whole of society, one that draws in many of the elements I spoke to previously, can help strengthen the hand we have in the rest of the world to be able to confront the control that foreigners have over the kinds of insights that would be applied to our societies. And you know, your point about the lights going off, you know, being here in Portugal where the lights literally went off last week, but I wasn't here yet, the impact is really substantial. And you know, these are, I think, elements that governments really need to consider before they jump in, you know, 100% into some of these techno solutions that are presented to them. Lastly, on the AI governance with these at the micro level, absolutely hear you, and I think a couple of things came to mind, and that's the importance of, excuse me, of transparency, explainability, and the opportunity for those outside to interrogate some of these systems. And that goes into the kind of framework and values that governments can apply. It's now it's usually a government guard their, you know, security sector operations, but I think that we have to recognize that there are so many dual uses that it's absolutely important to have transparency. For example, we should know which companies are outsourced with different aspects of developing these models, and to understand who else they provide these services to. So for example, if you're developing a model for, say, a humanitarian organization, and at the same time, you're developing models for frontier security for the EU or for, say, Australia, I think we should know that, because the risk for these data sets to be commingled become even more fuzzy, and the implications on people's rights and human agency becomes impoverished as a result of that. So I don't have a perfect answer, again, for how we specifically control these smaller models, but I do think that with appropriate inclusive frameworks that provide, you know, toolkits and responsibility mechanisms for these companies, we can ensure that there's more clarity around how society wants these technologies to be used. And I'll pass it over to the other speakers who may have other thoughts.
Thanks, Michael. So you definitely need to actually, when you're back in Bangkok, need to sit down and have a conversation, folks, in person with folks. There's obviously a lot of interest. Emily, do you have something to add?
Yeah, no, just want to talk about AI governance. So I didn't share it during my previous interventions, but at our local level, we actually thought about how can we have a democratized AI that is well regulated. And so we actually researched and studied and looked at how can we develop a human rights impact assessment to AI. And so we launched this report in December last year. It's called, Is Thailand Ready for AI that Respects Human Rights? And the answer is very short, is no. Thailand is not ready. And so then we are talking about what type of solutions do we have to make sure that we have AI that is inclusive, diverse, and that respects human rights, and that we are at the table of developing AI. So if you look at page 22 or 23 of our reports. There are some here. You can also scan it here. We are giving you the framework of a human rights-focused policy impact assessment to AI, where we will look at different dimensions: policy and governance, development and operation, access, oversight, and human rights norms. Really, the most important for us is really having AI binding law at the national level. There are a lot of global talks and global AI recommendations, a lot of voluntary measures that are in place in terms of AI governance. But when we are looking at our local context, these don't mean anything to us. Why? Because a lot of governments like Thailand with the OECD would claim that they would respect the AI recommendations that is out of the OECD. Actually, they don't care. So it's really important for us to power ourselves, to come up with our own solutions and to ask the Thai government to have AI binding, AI law grounded in human rights. AI must be transparent, accountable, subject to independent oversight, because we are navigating in Southeast Asian countries where there's no oversight because we're governed by authoritarian governments, and it's really important to understand that. Shout out to our friends from Laos who was leaving us comments. Our solidarity to you. There's no freedom of speech there, and it's one of the most closed country in the world. It's really important for people to realize that, and AI is coming from China there. So it's the worst that you can get from AI and surveillance. We don't want any shadow system. We want accountability for both the government and the private sector. So when you're talking about smaller companies, we actually want even smaller companies to be held into account. Thailand is discussing developing a human rights due diligence legislation that would also include companies that are working on AI, because when AI is harming people through discrimination, bias, there must be legal consequences. So that's why we want an AI-specific law that would include legal consequences when AI discriminates, when the AI is being biased, when AI is targeting feminists and other groups, because surveillance tech must be rolled out cannot be rolled out without any impact assessment and consent. And finally, we want at the local level to democratize AI policy making, and that's what we've been talking since the beginning. We need AI that includes voices from the ground. AI cannot be developed without us. AI regulations cannot be developed without Rohingya women, without refugees, without activists, without anyone that is going to be impacted. The Thai government actually has a draft decree, royal decree on AI that is close to the public, so nobody has access to it. So it's already an example of how AI regulation is not being democratized here. And finally, how can you help us and invest in us? I think as journalists, you hold a lot of power in shaping the narratives that goes online. You hold a lot of power in shaping the narratives that go online. And so online and offline, also on papers. So it's really important for us that when we say you need to support us and invest in us, we don't necessarily mean you need to give us money. But as I explained before, give what you can, and we need to take what we need. So we need solidarity from you, but we also need to give you the power that you have as a journalist to write about our stories in a powerful way, because we are tired of being always, the narrative always being victims. As Yasmin was saying, there are a lot of powerful Rohingya communities out there doing a lot for the communities. Us as civil society, as feminist groups, we're also doing a lot, for refugees. It's not normal that it's only when we have USAID cuts that all of a sudden there's a spotlight on us because we were protecting them. How come we were not celebrated for doing the hard work that we've been doing, for years? So you do hold a lot of power in shaping the narratives and the way that people see us. We are not the enemies of the states. We are humans, and we're actually here, and we're powering one another, and we're fighting for liberation. Thank you.
Thank you, Emily. Yasmin.
I don't have a lot to ask, but I think this one task for all of you is fairly easy to do. I have a card here that says I stand with Rohingya, so I'm expecting everyone to take a picture with me with this, and that you will post it online if you have a public account. Why? It's democratizing AI. AI is taking our information, and the algorithm relies on you to feed it the information. And so if you feed it positive information, it's a way for us to democratize AI and algorithm. Thank you.
Take the photo and don't forget to use the hashtag, okay? Okay, any questions from the floor? One last question, yes.
Hello, Marissa Small, member of the club. Considering the definition of hacktivism as a person who gains unauthorized access to computer files or networks in order to further social and political ends, a state actor can fall within this definition, perhaps not in the popular sense, we just call them hackers. Will we ever see human rights organizations or multinational organizations, even autonomous agents, adopting hacktivism or hacking to prevent or challenge human rights violations and or to enforce international law? If so, when, how, and should we expect this to be done through self-regulation or self-policing? Thank you.
Hacktivism that is using hacking for activist purposes to equalize power, when is it likely to happen, and how would you govern that? How would you regulate that?
I think it's a great idea. thinking for sharing it with us. I would love to hack, to hacktivism. I think we need more people like you, at the table speaking with us. We need more people with us to strategize. Exactly what I was saying before, we will never be able to do it alone, but we also need to be able to be the ones from the global majority, from the global south, to be able to be the ones finding our own solutions. And so we are going to hack the system, we are going to disrupt the system, and we need more people like you, we need more people to join us in conversations, because we are not asking for money. I think it's really important for people to understand, yes, the USAID cut are impacting everyone, but we're asking for solidarity, and solidarity also means please come with us at the table, share your knowledge with us, everything that you know, how we can hack the system, how we can disrupt the system, how we can reclaim our power. Like, we would love, to have a discussion with you and to also learn with you, to find solutions with us, because please give what you can and we will take what we need.
Michael, you want to respond to that question about hacktivism?
Yeah, a couple of thoughts I jotted down when I heard that, Marissa. Thanks for the thoughts. And it made me think about how technology, artificial intelligence, the move towards AGI and superintelligence is creating new areas, both philosophically and legally, to be thinking about. So, for example, we all know that historically what civil disobedience looks like. We saw it in Thailand during COVID. We've seen it in Palestine and Gaza. We've seen it in the United States. Is hacktivism the next sort of iteration of civil disobedience, and how do democracies address that? I think it's a really interesting question, and to Emily's point, it's one that we absolutely need to have conversations around, and we can't leave it to just a small group of people in well-financed societies to be able to make these decisions about how we should, because there's other areas. You mentioned hacktivism. Other areas that come to mind are the increasing interlacing of technology with human bodies, synthetic biology, cyborgization. These all present future problems in the future around caste, discrimination, etc., and also the opportunities. So I think having these future forward kinds of discussions are absolutely important to have. So thanks for bringing that up.
Emily, you already answered that, and Yasmin would prefer to keep quiet at this point. So Yasmin, since you didn't answer that question, I'm going to ask you one, and this is our final question. What gives you hope in this fight?
I think the fact that we're having this conversation right now, and the room is fairly full on a Friday afternoon. You could be doing
a long
something else.
Weekend, because
yes,
Monday's
exactly.
a holiday.
Exactly. So I'm really thankful that you all are here, you showed up, and I really hope that we can continue to collaborate in some extent. At least please go on and follow our work on Instagram or on Facebook. That would be the least of your support. I also think that the love and the support and the overall sort of solidarity that ALTSE in Burma and Manusha and other members of the coalition has shown RMCN has been really, really life-changing. We would not have been able to be here if it was not for all of the works that our predecessors have done, and 2 of them are veterans in this work, sitting right here by me, so I'm really, really honored. I think the other part of this is also that the women in my collective, many of them have dealt with extreme difficult, situations, circumstances that they've had to overcome, but they're still here, they're still committed, they want to keep going. And for me, I don't have any options. There are also children in the Rohingya refugee camps in Bangladesh and in Indonesia currently, just with a few tools that we've given, some stationery, and a curriculum book from Burma that we've printed, 100 copies or so, with a few laptops, maybe 4 or 5, they're the ones that are conducting classrooms in those camps, in the confine and the spaces that they're given. They're teaching younger children how to read and write. So I can't really tell you that I have no hope, because those are the people that I have to answer to. And if they still have hope to keep going, I don't have an option to give up. Thank you.
Thank you, Yasmin. Michael, what gives you hope in this fight?
100% to what Yasmin said. I also, what gives me hope is that people are increasingly willing to challenge prevailing technology orthodoxy or narratives, and I think that I'm hopeful that, to Yasmin's point, that a room full of people on a Thursday afternoon on a work day really illustrates the interest and the willingness for people to listen to other people's vulnerabilities and lived experiences and understand how we can keep technology human. Thank you.
And the final word goes to Emily.
Okay, so what gives me hope? When we were impacted overnight by the USAID cuts, I think we received an overwhelming number of messages of support from people from the Global South. What gave me hope was to see, even when we had the earthquake, because I think it's important to talk about the earthquake as well. The first people who show up when something like this happened were the people from Palestine, apologizing to me for not being responsive enough because they were being bombed. And I think what gives me hope is really truly the solidarity that is coming out from all of this. Yes, it's a dark time for all of us, but at the same time, there are a lot of opportunities for us to stand up, to rebuild the way that we want. And I really want to say thank you to everybody who has financially contributed to our survival. We received donations from individuals, from some people in the room. Thank you to our friends. And most of the people who gave to us are from the Global South and the global majority. I'm going to be very honest with you. I sent thousands of messages to people asking for donations to help us with refugees. The first people to respond were the people from the Global South. My friends in the Global North were told me, I will forward it. But the first people to respond were the people from the Global South, giving us even, 50 baht, 100 baht, 200 baht, 1,000 baht, even a small amount. It just showed the level of solidarity, and it gave me hope that we will be able to rebuild on our own, because we can start small, but we will go far.
And that's all we have. Thank you for sharing 2 hours of your Friday on the start of a long weekend. Thank you, Michael, from the Center for AI Leadership and Sprint Public Interest. Thank you, Yasmin, from Rohingya Mayafinal Collaborative Network. And thank you, Emily, from Manusha Foundation. Thank you, everyone, for listening. Please encourage your friends and colleagues to watch the Facebook Live and take pictures and continue this conversation. See you next time. Thank you, everybody.